Hey everyone. So the other day I listened to a really interesting podcast and I thought I want to share some of this information with you all because I found it to be very important. The podcast was on Living 4D with Paul Chek, and the episode was called Holistic Health and Performance for Women with Sara Gustafson. Sara is a holistic health practitioner and she specialises in women's health. Now, firstly, I just want to make a disclaimer that I am not an expert on this subject and I do not claim to be in any way. I just feel like I need to relay a lot of this information from this podcast because it's really important that both men and women alike and our society as a whole start learning this information and start integrating it into the way we do things. Because, the main point of this podcast is to say that men and women are equal, but we're also not the same. There are quite a lot of differences between men and women, and our society don't really acknowledge that too well. Like, for example, in workplaces, women are expected to work to the same capacity day in, day out, all year round, just like men are. But that just doesn't work out too good because it's not in line with women's physiology to be doing that. It's not in line with the cycles, the natural cycles that women go through, and it leads to a lot of stress, burning out, and in the end it leads to autoimmune disorder and illness. Another example is how women are treated, female athletes say. They're expected to perform pretty much the same as men. They're treated like men. They're expected to perform every week to the highest level, but women just aren't meant to do that. They have certain times in their cycle where they are better at performing, and there's other times where they need to go within and rest up. So another example is female patients in hospitals or doctor's offices. Like, they're given pretty much the same dosages as men, and that just shouldn't be the case, and it causes a lot more problems than it does good. So they're just a few examples as to where our society could benefit from learning and integrating this information about how women are in fact different to men, but nevertheless still equal. So she goes on in the podcast about a lot of these very interesting facts about the key differences between men and women, and a lot of this stuff I never knew about, and I think it's very important for people to start learning this information, and it's stuff that we should probably have learnt it back in health class at school, to be honest. So I'm going to read out a few of these differences just to illustrate this point here, how men and women are in fact different. Women have smaller joint surfaces and thinner cartilage. Women have 30% smaller type 1 muscle fibres and 50% smaller type 2 muscle fibres. Women can get injured a lot easier than men. Women experience more prolonged stress due to having more estrogen. Women receive and store information for longer periods, and they receive and store more information than men. Women have better memory. They have delayed onset of cortisol and a delayed onset of inflammation. Women have more brain processing power than men. The left and right hemisphere connect 30% better than men. The left and right brain hemisphere, Women are better at integrating emotion when communicating than men. Women are better at multitasking. Women are more susceptible to high stress, chronic fatigue syndrome, depression, an autoimmune disorder. 78% of all women, or 78% of all autoimmune disorder cases are women. Also, women develop more intense cellular responses to viruses and vaccines, and women have less enzymes in the liver. And that's just a few of the facts that she read out. There's a lot more too, and turns out scientists are discovering more and more differences all the time, and so that's just to show how little we really know about this stuff. And in our society, people just don't really consider these differences between men and women, but I think it's really important, as shown in this podcast. Another part of this podcast that really fascinated me was when she talked about the key characteristics and the nature of the menstrual cycle. And it wouldn't surprise me if most women out there, and let alone men, are not even aware of this information, because we're not taught it in schools or anything. I doubt people's parents would teach them this stuff, because the parents probably don't know this information either. But I think to have an understanding of this is really important and can benefit us in so many ways, especially the women out there. So in the podcast, she correlates the 4 main female archetypes with the 4 phases of the 28-day, on average 28-day menstrual cycle. And for those of you that don't know, the definition of archetype is the original pattern or model of which all things of the same type are representation or copies. So an archetype is like a subconscious personality that's within all of us, and there are lots of different archetypes, and each of us will express one or more of these at any given time of our life, depending on the roles we're playing or depending on just where we're at in our life. So to begin with, she begins with phase 1 of the menstrual cycle, which is days 1 to 7. Phase 1 correlates to the maiden archetype. This is a time of emerging. This is when the female is starting to feel like herself again. She's slowly gaining more energy and generally starting to feel good again. The traits of the maiden are pure, innocent, confident, soft, free-spirited. So in phase 1, this is a time where estrogen and testosterone begin to slowly replenish, and the woman starts to feel like herself again. Phase 2, which is days 8 to 14, correlates to the archetype of the wild woman. This is the time where the female has the most energy. She begins to become very driven and goal orientated, and this is the best time to take on challenges such as intense exercise and just hard work in general. This is the time when estrogen and testosterone peak. Some of the traits of the wild woman is very sexual, protective. She's a warrior woman, very ambitious and driven, so you don't want to mess with that wild woman. Phase 3 of this cycle is days 15 to 21, and phase 3 correlates with the mother or nurturer archetype. Phase 3 is the time to start focusing more on self-care and starting to take it easy in preparation for menstruation. At this time, testosterone and estrogen levels start to begin to lower, and the mother and nurturer traits is she's the creator, the protector, the giver. She is caring and self-caring. So phase 3 is a time to start focusing more on self-care and really looking after yourself. phase 4 of this cycle is days 22 to 28, and this phase correlates to the wise woman archetype. Phase 4 of the menstruation cycle is really time to slow down. It is a time for the woman to rest and go within. It's a really good time for reflection and self-reflection, but also it's a really bad time for her to be doing hard or intense exercise or hard work or anything stressful really, because she's much more prone to getting super stressed out and much more prone to injury at this time, because this is when estrogen and testosterone are at their lowest. So this is where the woman really needs to focus on just resting and not overly exerting herself. The traits of the wise woman are, she is very experienced, she is the carrier of wisdom, she is the advisor, and she helps you to grow. So that's pretty much a brief overview of the natural cycle that women go through every month. In our society, I really never hear this topic being discussed. It seems to be very overlooked and ignored. It's something that's just not acknowledged in our day-to-day life. But I feel like it really should be, because the way women are treated in the workplace, for example, these days, it's really going against their own natural cycle. It's going against nature rather than with it, and it's causing so many problems. Women are expected to just keep pushing and pushing and just keep working despite their body's call to go within and rest. Like in our society, they're just expected to work day in, day out, just like men, and it's just not working. It causes so much stress for women. It causes them to burn out, and it causes illness in the long run. No wonder so many more women have autoimmune disorders than men do. So I think if in our society more people understood, acknowledged and implemented changes around this natural cycle that women go through, it would benefit our society in a lot of ways. Women would be much more likely to avoid injury and illness. Workplaces would run a lot more smoothly, I believe. Relationships would improve. And the world would just be a happier and more fun place to be in general. So the main point of this video is to show that with men and women, instead of equality, there should be equity, because equality insinuates that men and women are treated the same, and as we know, that just doesn't work because men and women are not the same. Whereas with equity, it acknowledges that men and women are equal, but we're different. So then we can begin to treat women differently and more in accordance with their own natural cycles. So yeah, I hope you all got a lot of interesting and useful information out of this, and I encourage you all to look into this topic a lot more, and yeah, I hope this can help a lot of people and bring a lot of awareness to this subject. So if you want to listen to a much more in-depth and detailed perspective on this, I encourage you all to listen to this podcast. Like, it goes for nearly 3 hours, but it's really worth listening to. So much great information there, and I'll put a link in the description of this video. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all later.